a jolt of apprehension. The governor's condition somehow looks graver in this terrible, flickering light. "The games will be up and running again soon," he goes on, undaunted by the eerie silence and the tension so thick it seems to weigh down on the stadium like a fog. "But as you've probably noticed by looking at me, I've had other, more pressing matters to deal with." Another pause here, as the governor gazes across the rows of somber-faced residents. Lily shivers, despite the humid night air which smells of burning rubber, an inexplicable wave of dread washing over her. I hope he can pull this one out. We need him back. We need leadership. We need him to be the governor. Holding her collar tight with one hand, she feels conflicting emotions crashing within her. She feels sympathy for the man, shame, smoldering anger for the motherfuckers who did this, and swimming underneath the surface of it all, incessant, primal, a debilitating wave of doubt. "As you know, it's been a long time since we've had new people arrive in town." He takes a deep breath as though girding himself against a surge of pain. "So, recently when a small band of survivors showed up, I was thrilled. I figured they were like us, happy to be alive, thankful to see other survivors. But that was not the case." In the pause that follows, his words echo up into the sky and slap back at the crowd against the far storefronts. "There is evil in this world, and not all of it is in the form of those undead monsters clawing at our fences." Just for an instant, he glances down at the cardboard box next to him. Lily wonders what's in the thing. A visual aid of some sort, perhaps? And the feeling it gives her isn't exactly comforting. She wonders if anybody else in the stands is as bothered by that damp, moldering, blood-spotted box as she. Does it occur to anybody that whatever is in that box may change the course of their destinies? "At first I had no idea what they were capable of," Philip Blake continues, gazing back up at the gallery. "I trusted them. It was a grave mistake. They needed supplies, some things we seem to have plenty of. They're living in a nearby prison. They took our head of security, Martinez, back with them. I guess there was talk of combining the camps, one group moving to the safest place to live." Now he kneels down by the box, and his voice goes low and thick with contempt. The microphone picks up every nuance, every smack of his lips, every click and crackle in the back of his throat. "Some of them stayed behind. And one night while my guard was down, they jumped me and tortured me, mutilated me, and then left me for dead." From the corner of the stands, Lily listens closely, her stomach going cold. She detects a slight embellishment of the truth. They jumped him? They tortured him? It was a woman with a katana sword, right? What is he up to? The suspicion starts to gnaw at Lily as the man out in the dusty, flickering pantomime of light continues, his voice getting lower and thicker by the minute. "They escaped," he goes on, kneeling by that mysterious box as though a paper clown is about to pop out. "But you all need to know this." He pauses and scans the crowd as though taking their measure. "Along the way, they killed Dr. Stevens. These people are ruthless, inhuman savages." He pauses again, as though the exertion of his rage has already exhausted him. Lily watches the man kneeling in the flickering pool of phosphorus light. Something is very, very wrong about this. How does he know they killed Dr. Stevens? He was in a coma at the time, and all the witnesses are long gone. How does he know Stevens didn't simply stumble into a nest of biters? Lily clenches her fists. "I feared for Martinez's life," the man goes on, "not knowing if they'd taken him prisoner or worse. Before we could send out a search party, Something was left at the main gate overnight." He flips open the flaps on the top of the box. He pulls out a dark, glistening object about the size of a deflated basketball. "They left this!" He stands and displays the object for the perusal of all in attendance. Despite the collective inhaling of breaths, faint gasps, and averting of gazes among some of the spectators, a strange transference occurs in the audience. The sight of a severed head when grasped by the hair and allowed to dangle in space provokes an innate reaction in humans formed not only by natural revulsion, but also by hundreds of thousands of years of genetic programming. Off to the side of the bleachers, her hands folded in her lap, Lily just looks down and shakes her head. She expected something like this. All the lying has taken her by surprise, though, and the sight of the exsanguinated head of Cesar Martinez provokes more repulsion than she would have expected. She glimpsed it once or twice in the woods during their tempestuous retreat from the meadow, but this ghastly thing suspended by the hair in the governor's hand looks different, somehow, in the context of the flickering arc light. A human head detached from its moorings registers to the mind in stages, first as artificial, and then almost comically macabre. The pale, rubbery face of the once handsome Latino, now a mere simulacrum of a face. A fleshy Halloween effigy with a look of blank hunger frozen on its features. Then the true horror quickly makes itself known, and the reality of the spectacle sets in. For a brief instant, as the governor silently holds the object for all to absorb, the head turns lazily on its pendulum of hair. To Lily, the movement looks languid and dreamy in the flashing light. Tendrils of bloody tendons and nerves dangle from its ragged bottom like roots. Black fluid drips from its gaping mouth, and if it weren't for the milky film over the eyes, it would be hard to tell that Martinez had already turned at the point of decapitation. A tattered bandana still clings to the skull, matted and soaked with blood. The people in the back rows, gazing down upon the abomination at a distance of more than 25 yards, can't see that the bloodless face is still twitching with the hectic rigor mortis of the undead, the ticks and shudders, the rusty hinges of the jaw still pulsing, as it will for eternity, until the thing is incinerated or the brain is destroyed. Lily is among the few close enough to see this. She recognizes the dreadful signs of eternal damnation. "Jesus Christ," she utters to no one in particular, barely sensing Austin's presence next to her, or the gentle reassurance of his hand on her arm. The man out in the flickering infield comments, "I knew none of you would want to see this, and I apologize for shocking you. I just want to make you all completely aware of the kind of people we're dealing with here." Another dramatic pause from the governor. "Monsters!" Lily swallows her disgust. Shooting a quick glance over her shoulder, she sees the insidious transaction rippling through the crowd. Some of the men present clench their fists, their expressions visibly changing from shock to anger, their eyes narrowing with rage. Some of the women clutch their children tighter, turning their faces inward against their breasts, averting young gazes away from the horror on the infield. Others grit their teeth in a peak of hatred and bloodlust. Lily is mortified by the manipulation underway, the mob mentality emerging in the throng. The voice from the loudspeakers continues. "These savages know where we live. They know what we have. They know our strengths and they know our weaknesses." He scans the anguished faces. "I say we strike at them before they have a chance to come at us." Now Lily jerks at the unexpected chorus of shouts and howls from the stands behind her. It's not only men. The voices represent all ages, genders, and sensibilities, sending up a dark hallelujah of cries into the sputtering silver radiance of the sky. Some of the onlookers pump their fists. Others bellow garbled cries of rage that sound almost feral. The governor feeds off it,
Still holding the head like some deranged Shakespearean character in a play, moving in the surreal slow motion of the flickering lamps, he is pouring on the call to action as he speaks into the mic. I refuse to stand down and allow them to destroy us. Not after everything we've lost. Not after everything we've sacrificed. Some of the spectators begin to holler encouragement, as though in a religious call and response, which makes Lily shudder with dread, and coaxes another reassuring pat of the arm from Austin, who continually whispers to her now, It's okay. It'll be okay. It's okay, Lily. Behind them, one man booms, Fuck yeah! Another one yells, Damn straight! And the voices rise and swell as the governor drowns the noise with his amplified growl. We've worked too hard to build what we have here, and I'll be goddamned if I'm gonna let anyone take it away from me! The crowd roars, and Lily has had enough. She rises to her feet and gives Austin a look. Nodding, Austin gets up and follows her out of the bleachers and around the corner of the stands. I'm glad to see you feel the same way, the governor is telling the crowd now. His tone calming, his voice becoming almost hypnotic. First, we need to find them. I know most of the people who lived in this area migrated to Atlanta when the government ordered us all into the cities, but there has to be someone here who has at least a passing familiarity with the area. If you do, please let me know. On their way out of the arena, marching through the noxious darkness of a litter-strewn exit tunnel, Lily hears the amplified voice like a ghostly revenant, echoing and reverberating through the passageway. The prison they live in could be 5 miles away or it could be 15, and we're not even sure of which direction it's in. This is not gonna be easy. Lily and Austin emerge from the tunnel and walk away from the edifice, the sound of the crackling voice fading in their ears. But it will get done. They will be punished. Of that, you can be sure. Lily gets very little sleep that night. She writhes in a tangle of bed sheets next to Austin, feeling heavy and lethargic and nauseous. She's been taking prenatal vitamins for the last week and drinking as much water as possible, and her bladder has been on high alert. At least half a dozen times through the night she gets up and goes to the bathroom, and while sitting on the toilet, she hears the eerie, unsettling distant voices of the dead drifting on the winds out in the vast fields of scabrous pastureland west of town. The governor has correctly noted that the biters weren't the true source of evil in this new world, and he was right. But now Lily stews in a jumble of contrary emotions and festering doubt. She wants to believe in the governor. She has to. But she can't ignore the fears kindling in her. Her skin tingles and rashes with goosebumps as she wanders her apartment, getting in and out of bed, trying not to awaken Austin. By the time the gray light of dawn has pushed the shadows away, she has formulated a course of action. She will talk to the man, try to reason with him. He'll listen to her if she approaches it the right way. After all, they all want the same thing, to keep Woodbury safe. But stirring up the people this way, all this gruesome saber-rattling, is insane. Lily has to talk some sense into the man. He'll listen to her. She has to try. She waits until mid-morning, suffering through a tense breakfast with Austin, before setting out to find the governor. Austin wants to go with her, but for some reason she wants to do this by herself. She tries his apartment building first, but finds no one home. She goes to the infirmary and asks Bob if he's seen the man, but Bob has no idea where Philip is at the moment. She wanders the streets for a while until she hears the sound of gunfire coming from the fences out behind the racetrack. She follows the sound. The day is already heated up, the pale sky heavy with humidity. The high sun bakes the cracked asphalt parking lots, and the air smells of tar and manure. Lily has already sweated through her sleeveless Georgia Tech t-shirt and ripped denim shorts, and the cramps have returned. She has no appetite, and she can't tell which is playing havoc with her system more, the pregnancy or the fear. On the south side of the arena, she finds Gabe and Bruce standing near a gate, smoking cigarettes, their rifles slung over their shoulders, paramilitary style. The intermittent bark of small-caliber gunfire comes from behind them, from somewhere along the big cyclone fence barricade separating the town from the walker-infested outskirts. "Is Philip around?" Lily asks Gabe as she approaches the two bodyguards. "What do you want?" Bruce Cooper speaks up before Gabe has a chance to say anything. "He's busy right now." "Hey, lighten up," Gabe says to the big barrel-chested black man in sweat-damp camo fatigues. "She's on our side." Gabe turns to Lily. "He's down at the fence doing a little target practice, Lily. What do you need?" "Just wanted to talk to him for a second," she says. "Any luck with the search for the prison?" Gabe shrugs. "We got guys looking up and down McCoster Lane, but nothing yet." "There's something I can help you with?" Lily sighs. "Just thought I might have a little chat with the governor. No big deal. Just had a few ideas." Gabe and Bruce share a fleeting glance. "I don't know. He said he didn't want to be—" Right then, the sound of a gravelly voice rings out from around the corner. "It's okay. Let her come on down." They let Lily pass, and she strides through the gate and down a narrow sidewalk, past rows of empty handicapped parking places, until she sees a gaunt, one-armed man in an olive-drab army surplus jacket standing in the middle distance near a chain-link barricade. "An amazing organ, the human brain," he says without looking at her. He stands next to a wheelbarrow brimming with weapons, guns of all size and caliber. And it quickly becomes obvious that he's been shooting at walkers on the other side of the fence, as though trying his hand at a grotesque shooting gallery. A dozen or so ragged bodies lie on the ground outside the chain-link barrier, the air almost blue with gun smoke. "It's like a computer that can reboot itself," he mumbles, selecting a small 9mm pistol from the wheelbarrow with his left hand, raising the gun, thumbing the hammer, and aiming it. "It's so goddamn fragile. It can crash at any moment." He fires at the cluster of walkers on the other side of the fence. "Fuck!" The bullet grazes the skull of a female in a tattered, blood-stained sundress. The female staggers and stays upright, and keeps banging against the fence. The governor spits angrily. "Ain't worth shit left-handed." He fires again and again, until the fourth blast shatters the female's skull in a fountain of brain matter that sends her sliding down the fence in a greasy leech trail of gore. "This ain't gonna be easy," Philip grumbles. "Relearning every goddamn thing in the book." He glances at Lily. "You come to spank me a little bit?" Lily looks at him. "Excuse me?" "I could tell you weren't exactly thrilled with my little presentation." "I never said—" "I could tell by your body language, the expression on your face. You didn't seem all that crazy about my oratory skills." The way he says this in his Georgia twang, putting exaggerated enunciation on the word oratory, puts her hackles up. Is he toying with her? Is he challenging her? She licks her lips and carefully chooses her words. "Okay, look. I'm sure you know what you're doing. I'm not trying to tell you how to run this town. It's just that there were children in that audience. And you think I crossed the line when I showed them what was left of Martinez?" Lily takes a deep breath. "All right, yes. To be honest with you, yeah. I thought it was a bit much." He puts the 9mm back in the wheelbarrow and selects a nickel-plated .357. He checks the cylinder and lines up another shot. "There's a war coming, Lily," he says softly, drawing a bead on another walker out in the shade of an ancient, twisted live oak. "And I promise you one thing." His left arm is as steady as a steel girder now. "If these people are not ready to defend our town at all costs, we will lose everything." His left index finger caresses the trigger pad. He's getting the hang of it now. Everything you love, everything that is dear to you, Lily, you will, I guarantee it, lose it. He closes his right eye and peers down the barrel with his left and fires. Lily doesn't jerk at the noise, not even the slightest flinch, despite the volume of the 357's report, but instead just stands there staring at the man, thinking, feeling the cold sensation of dread turning into certainty within her. The man has a point. On the other side of the fence, a large male biter folds to the ground in a baptism of blood and fluids. Lily bites down hard. She senses the tiny ember of life within her, struggling, a seedling starving for sunlight. At last, Lily says very softly, "You're right. I'm with you. We all are, no matter what happens. We're ready, no matter how bad it gets." That afternoon, the cramps worsen until Lily can't even stand up straight anymore. She lies in a fetal position on the futon in her bedroom with packing blankets over the windows to block out the harsh light of the spring sun. She spikes a mild fever, 101 by dinner time, and she starts seeing streaks of light across her field of vision like sunspots, flaring brightly with each stabbing pain in her midsection and dull throb above the bridge of her nose. By 6 o'clock, the chills have begun quaking through her, making her shiver convulsively under the ratty thermal blanket that Austin has brought over from his place. She feels as though she's about to vomit, but can't quite bring anything up. She's miserable. Eventually, she manages to climb out of bed to go to the bathroom. Her lower back twinges painfully, stiffly, as she shuffles barefoot across her hardwood floors, staggering into the john and closing herself into the reeking chamber of cracked tile and ancient linoleum flooring. She slumps down in the toilet and tries to pee, but can't even do that. Austin has been forcing fluids into her, trying to guard against dehydration, but Lily's system is so out of whack she can't bear to drink more than a few ounces of water at a time. Now she sits in the darkness of the bathroom and tries to breathe through the cramps, which send hot tremors of agony up her bowels and through her guts. She feels weak, wrung out, limp, like a piano just fell on her. Is it just the stress? She looks down and blinks. She sees the blood, as bright as strawberry jam stippling the crotch of her panties, which now dangle down around her ankles. Her entire body goes icy cold. She has been diligent about checking her underwear for spotting and up until now has been clean. She tries to keep calm, tries to breathe deeply, tries to think. A loud knocking shakes her out of her daze. "Lily?" Austin's voice comes from outside the door, tinged with alarm. "You okay?" She leans over and grasps the doorknob, nearly falling off the porcelain stool. She manages to crack the door open and then looks up into Austin's glassy, terrified eyes. "I think maybe we should go see Bob," she utters softly, her voice brittle with fear. Chapter 8. That night, Philip Blake cleans house, metaphorically and literally. A man on the cusp of a revolution, a warrior on the precipice of war. He wants his environment to reflect the clean, austere, sterile organization of his brain. No more disembodied voices, no more ambivalence brought on by his symbiotic second self. In the autoclave of his mind, cauterized and cleansed by his ordeal, any vestige of Brian Blake has been burned away, sandblasted from the dark crevices of his thoughts. He is a clockwork mechanism now, calibrated for one thing and one thing only: vengeance. So he begins the process with the rooms of his apartment, the scene of the crime. There are still faded signs of the abomination. He is compelled to clean deeper. Bruce brings him cleaning supplies from the warehouse, and he spends hours eradicating any remaining evidence of his torture at the hands of that lunatic bitch with the sword. He wipes down the walls of his living room with Dutch cleanser. working awkwardly with his left hand, and he carefully runs a battery-powered dirt devil over the matted carpet, which still bears the faded stains of his own blood. He uses a cleaning solvent on the more stubborn stains, scrubbing with a soft brush until the rug begins to shred apart. He straightens the rooms, makes the bed, bags the dirty laundry, mops the hardwood floors with Murphy's oil soap, and wipes the mossy grime from the glass panels of his matrix of aquariums, paying little attention to the twitching severed heads within them. He keeps Penny chained to the eye bolt in the foyer while he works, every few moments making note of her presence in the other room, the soft burr of her perpetual growling, the dull rattling of her chain as she strains to escape, the faint clack of her piranha-like teeth snapping at the air with blind hunger. As he cleans around her, he finds himself being more and more bothered by that soft clacking noise. It takes him hours to sanitize the place to his satisfaction. Working with one arm makes some of the tasks, such as opening a garbage bag or pushing a broom around corners, a little tricky. To make matters worse, he keeps seeing corners that he missed, nooks and crannies still bearing signs of his torment, sticky patches of dried blood, a discarded roll of tape, a drill bit still crusted with his tissue under a chair, a fingernail in the nap of the carpet. He cleans well into the night, until he has nearly erased every last remnant of his suffering. He even rearranges the sparse furniture to cover or hide the scars he cannot expunge. The scorch marks from the acetylene torch, the nail holes in the rug from the plywood panel. At length he obliterates any visible proof that torture ever occurred here. Satisfied with the job, he collapses into his recliner in the side room. The soft percolating of the aquariums calms him, the muffled thudding and tapping of the reanimated faces bumping against the inside of the glass almost soothing to him. He stares at the bloated, sodden faces undulating behind their veils of water. He imagines the glorious moment when he takes that dreadlock-wearing bitch apart piece by piece. And eventually he drifts off. He dreams of the old days, and he sees himself at home in Waynesboro with his wife and child, a mythology his brain has now chiseled into itself with the permanence of a stone tablet. And he is happy. Truly happy. Maybe the only time he felt such happiness in his life. He holds Penny on his lap in the cozy little sunroom off the kitchen in the rear of the clapboard house on Pilsen Street, with Sarah Blake curled up on the sofa next to them, her head on Philip's shoulder, as Philip reads a Dr. Seuss book aloud to Penny. But something intrudes on the scene. A strange tapping noise. A dull metallic clacking. In the dream, he looks up at the ceiling and sees cracks forming, each tapping noise spreading another hairline fracture in the plaster overhead, a sifting of dust motes filtering down through rays of sunlight. The tapping noise rises and quickens, and he sees more cracks forming until the ceiling begins to rend apart. He screams as the room collapses in on itself. The cataclysm wakes him up. He jerks forward in the chair with a start, his wounds panging with sharp stabs of agony from the hammer blows and gashes and puncture sores that are still tight with sutures under his clothes. He is damp with cold sweat, and his phantom arm throbs. He swallows stomach acid and looks around the room, the dull glow and bubbling of the aquariums bringing him back to reality. And he realizes he still hears the infernal clacking noise, the sound of Penny's chattering teeth in the other room. He has to do something about it. The last stage of his house cleaning.
Don't you worry, Lily girl. I happen to have quite a bit of practice catching babies,
Bob Stuckey says, blatantly lying to the couple in the magnesium-silver brightness of the underground infirmary. It's the middle of the night, and the cavernous room is as silent as a morgue. Bob has rolled a pulse ox unit over to the bed on which Lily now lies covered in a sheet, with Austin nearby, fidgeting, chewing his fingernails, and shooting glances back and forth from Lily's ashen face to Bob's weathered, smiling visage.
I ain't no OBGYN, Bob adds, but I had to watch over my share of pregnant gals during my stint in the Army. You and your baby are gonna be fine. Ship shape, 4x4, little lady?
The truth is, Bob had only dealt with a single pregnant woman during his tour in Afghanistan, a translator, a local girl who had been only 17 when one of the guys from the PX had knocked her up. Bob had kept her condition under wraps until the day she miscarried. It was Bob who had to give the woman the news, although he was convinced back then, and still is today, that she already knew. A woman knows. That's all there is to it. A woman knows.
What about the spotting?
Lily asks. She lies on the same gurney on which the governor floated in the balance between life and death for so many days. Bob has inserted an IV stick into her arm just above the wrist, the last bag of glucose in the storage pantry, in order to stave off dehydration and keep her stable. Now Bob tries to maintain the reassuring tone in his voice as he hovers over her.
It ain't that uncommon during the first trimester,
he says, not really knowing what he's talking about, turning to wash his hands in the steel sink behind them. The drumming of the water on the basin is excruciatingly loud in the stillness of the infirmary. The room is a pressure cooker of emotion.
I'm sure everything is right as rain,
Bob says with his back turned to them. Whatever you need, Bob. Just let me know, Austin says then. Dressed in his hoodie and ponytail, he looks like a lost child who could break down into sobs at any moment. He puts a hand on Lily's bare shoulder. Bob dries his hands on a towel.
Lily Call's gonna be a mom. I still can't get over it.
He turns and comes back over to the bed. He smiles down at her as he slips on surgical gloves.
This is just what we need around this place,
he says with false cheer.
Some good news for once.
He reaches under the sheet and gently palpates her tummy, trying to remember how to diagnose a miscarriage.
You're gonna be great at it, too.
He turns to a tray of instruments and finds a flat stainless steel probe.
Some people are just cut out for it, know what I mean? I was never cut out for it. God knows.
Lily turns her head to the side and closes her eyes, and Bob can tell she's trying not to cry.
It doesn't feel right,
she murmurs.
Something's wrong, Bob. I can tell, I can feel it.
Bob looks at Austin.
Son, I'm gonna have to do a pelvic exam on her.
Austin has tears in his eyes. He knows. Bob can see it in the young man's glazed expression.
Whatever you need to do, Bob. Honey, I'm gonna have to go in there and have a look-see, he says. It ain't gonna be too comfortable, and it's gonna be a little cold.
Her eyes still closed. Lily barely emits a whisper.
It's okay. All right. Here we go.
Damn it! Hold still!
Philip Blake crouches in the darkness of his foyer, working with the needle-nosed pliers, his left hand gloved and protected with a layer of duct tape.
I know you're not enjoying this, but I hope you understand how much better this'll make things.
He probes the black maw of his dead daughter's mouth with the pliers, trying to latch on to her upper incisors. Penny keeps trying to chew on his hand, but he keeps her immobilized with his jackboot on her lower half. Her reek engulfs him as he works, but he ignores it.
It really is for the good of our relationship,
he says, finally latching on to one of her upper teeth with the pincers.
Here it comes.
He extracts a tooth, the sound like a tiny cork popping, and pulls the bloody pellet free, trailing delicate threads of pulp. Penny rears back for a moment, her demonic features puckering, her wide milky eyes fixed on some empty void beyond this world.
Here comes another one,
Philip mutters softly, as though speaking to a pet.
I can feel it loosening.
He grunts as another tooth pops free.
There, see? This isn't so bad, is it?
He tosses the second tooth into a wastebasket behind him, and then turns back to the girl thing.
You're almost getting used to the feeling, aren't you?
She drools a black, oily substance as he removes one tooth after another, her face now going as blank as the dark side of the moon.
Just a few more and we'll be done.
he comments with fake cheer, working on her lower teeth.
Sound good?
He pulls the last few jagged lower teeth with minimum effort, the tiny threads of tissue looping across the front of her filthy sundress. Thanks to advanced decomposition, the teeth come out easily on their dead roots. There, Philip says reassuringly. All done. For a brief instant, standing in that silent infirmary at the foot of Lily's gurney, Bob remembers that one time in Afghanistan when he assisted the field surgeon in the performance of a D&C on the translator. The removal of any remaining fetal or placental tissue after a pregnancy has been lost. And now he searches his memory for the lessons of that day. He gently reaches under the sheet covering Lily's lower half. He doesn't look at Lily's face. She looks away. Bob begins the exam. He remembers the way a healthy uterus is supposed to feel during the early weeks of a viable pregnancy, according to the field surgeon, versus the way it feels in the aftermath of a miscarriage. It takes only a few seconds for Bob to find the end of the cervix. Lily lets out an anguished mewling sound that breaks Bob's heart. He palpates the uterus and finds it completely dilated, heavy with blood and slough. This is all he needs to know. He gently pulls back, removing his hand from her.
Lily, I want you to remember something,
he says then, removing his gloves.
There's no reason. Oh, no.
She's already softly crying, her head still turned away, her tears soaking the pillow.
I knew it. I knew it.
Oh, Jesus. Austin puts his head down on the gurney's side rail. Oh, God.
What was I thinking?
She softly, silently weeps into the gurney's pillow.
What the fuck was I thinking?
Bob is crestfallen.
Now, honey, let's not start kicking ourselves in the ass, okay? The good news is you can try again. You're a young gal, you're healthy. You can definitely try again.
Lily stops crying.
Enough, Bob.
Bob looks down.
I'm sorry, honey.
Austin looks up, wipes his eyes and gazes at the wall. He lets out a long, pained breath.
Fuck. Give me a towel, Bob.
Lily sits up on the gurney. She has a strange expression on her face, impossible to read. But one glance at it and Bob knows to shut the fuck up and get the woman a towel. He grabs a cloth and hands it to her.
Unhook me from this shit,
she says flatly, wiping herself off.
I gotta get out of here.
Bob removes the stick, wipes her wrist and puts a bandage on the site. She shoves herself off the gurney. For a moment she looks as if she might fall over. Austin steadies her, gently holding her by the shoulder. She pushes him away and finds her jeans draped over a chair back.
I'm fine.
She gets dressed.
I'm perfectly fine. Honey, take it easy.
Bob circles around her as though blocking her path to the door.
You probably ought to just stay off your feet for a while. Get out of my way, Bob,
she says with fists clenched now, jaw set with determination.
Lily, why don't we...
Austin falls silent when she shoots him a look. The expression on her face, the teeth gritted tightly, the smoldering cinders of rage in her eyes, takes Austin aback. Bob wants to say something, but figures maybe it's better if he just lets her go. He steps aside and then looks at Austin, gesturing for him to back off. Lily is already halfway across the room. The door slams behind her, the residual tension crackling in her slipstream. For an endless, agonizing moment, Philip Blake kneels before his monstrous offspring in the dusty gloom of that apartment foyer. Penny looks strangely hobbled by the slipshod dental procedure. She wobbles on her spindly little legs for a moment, moving her blackened lips around rotten, bloody gums, her empty gaze riveted on the man in front of her. Philip leans down toward the dead girl, his mind filled with false memories of tucking his daughter into bed at night, reading storybooks to her. stroking her lustrous goldenrod curls and planting kisses on her fragrant little forehead.
"All better,"
he murmurs to the creature chained to the wall.
"Now come here."
He puts his arms around her and gives her a hug. She feels like a brittle husk in his arms, like a tiny scarecrow. He cradles her cold, mottled jawline in his gloved left hand.
"Give Daddy a kiss."
He kisses her rancid divot of a mouth, seeking warmth and love, but tasting only the bitter rot of spoiled meat and fly-specked feces. He rears back, an involuntary jerk repulsed by the string of slimy tissue adhering to his lips. He gasps and frantically wipes away the black drool, his stomach heaving suddenly. She lurches toward him, eyes narrowing, trying to bite him with her pulpy black gums. He doubles over, holding her head back with one arm. The nausea within him turns to a column of hot bile rising up his gorge. He vomits on the hardwood floor, the yellow viscous stew of stomach acid spattering across the floorboards. He retches and convulses until there's nothing left to expel. Falling back on his knees, he wipes his mouth, hyperventilating.
"No, honey. I'm sorry."
He swallows hard and tries to get his bearings back, tries to push back the shame and disgust.
"Don't think anything of it."
He gets his breath back. He swallows again.
"I'm sure. With time, I'll...
He wipes his face.
Please don't let this..."
All at once, the bang of somebody knocking loudly on the apartment door interrupts. The governor sniffs back his revulsion. He blinks at the noise.
"Fuck!"
He rises on weak knees.
"Fuck!"
Over the course of the next 30 seconds, the time it takes Philip Blake to get himself together, cross the foyer, unsnap the deadbolt, and throw the door open, he transforms from a trembling, weak, unrequited father to a diamond-hard leader of men.
"Did I or did I not say I was not to be disturbed?"
He snarls coldly at the shadowy figure standing in the dim light of the corridor. Gabe clears his throat instinctively. Clad in an army surplus jacket cinched at the waist with a gun belt and bandolier, he measures his words.
"Sorry, boss.
Some shit's going down."
"What shit?"
Gabe takes a breath. "Okay, there was an explosion. We think at the National Guard station, huge cloud of smoke going into the air. Bruce took some men to investigate. They were gone a few minutes, and then we heard gunfire nearby."
"Nearby?"
"Yeah, same direction." The governor sears his gaze into the man's eyes.
"Then why don't you just grab a car and..." "Fuck!"
He turns back to the apartment.
"Never mind. Forget it. Follow me."
They take one of the armored trucks. The governor rides in the cab on the passenger side, holding an AR-15 on his lap as Gabe drives. Gabe hardly says a word the whole trip out. Down Flat Shoals Road, past miles of walker-riddled forest, up Highway 85 and down a long farm road toward the smudge of black smoke visible against the night sky, while the governor silently broods in the shotgun seat. A pair of Gabe's men, Rudy and Gus, ride outside the cab, one on each flank, standing on a footrail in the wind, cradling assault rifles. As they rumble eastward through the night, the governor feels his phantom arm twinge with needles of pain at every bump, every jerk, a bizarre sensation that keeps tugging at his peripheral vision in the green, glowing darkness of the cab, making him think there's a tingling ghost arm protruding from his stump, and it makes him angrier by the minute. He ruminates silently in the rattling dark, thinking about going to war, thinking about twisting off the head of that bitch who attacked him. The great military leaders of yore, the men Philip has read about in history books, everybody from MacArthur to Robert E. Lee, stayed away from the front, huddled in tents with their commanders, planning, strategizing, looking at maps. Not Philip Blake. He fancies himself as Attila the Hun, or maybe Alexander the Great, roaring into Egypt with revenge on his mind and death dripping off the bloody tip of his sword. His eye patch itches as the adrenaline courses through him. He wears a leather driving glove on his left hand that creaks as he clenches his fist. They approach a familiar turnoff snaking off the main two-lane. The wind has blown a letter off the tall roadside sign which now says, "Wall Art. Save money, live better." In the middle distance, the governor can see the vast leprous cement of the Walmart parking lot gleaming like a gray ocean in the moonlight. Near the west edge of the lot, a few dark, ragged objects lie on the pavement near a familiar-looking cargo truck. The governor recognizes the truck. It's from Woodbury's fleet. "Fuck!" The governor points. "Over there, Gabe, near the garbage dumpsters." Gabe guns the truck and it booms across the parking lot, raising a cloud of dust into the night sky. The air brakes come on as they approach the battlefield. Gabe skids to a stop 30 feet away with a jerk. "Fuck!" The governor shoves his door open and stands on the skid, gazing at the carnage strewn across the lot like discarded rag dolls. "Fuck!" The governor hops off the skid and leads the 3 other men across the lot to the dead bodies. For a moment, nobody says anything. The governor surveys the scene, makes note of the evidence. The cargo truck still idles, the carbon monoxide and cordite still hanging in the air like a thick blue shroud over the scene. "Jesus," Gabe utters, looking down at the 4 bodies lying in pools of blood across the concrete. One of them is headless, the body also missing hands, the severed cranium lying in a puddle of gore 15 feet away. Another one, the kid named Curtis, lies supine with arms akimbo and dead eyes still open and staring up at the stars. A third one lies dead in a swamp of blood and tissue, his guts blooming out of a large gash in his belly. It doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to deduce that the long, clean cuts, the neatly severed appendages, are the result of a Japanese katana sword. Gabe walks over to the largest body, a black man still clinging to life but quickly bleeding out, his neck ravaged by multiple high-caliber blasts. His face sticky with his own blood, his eyes showing mostly whites. Bruce Cooper tries to speak with his last breaths. Nobody can understand him. The governor moves over to the fallen man and gazes down at the body with very little emotion other than simmering rage. "His head is still intact," Philip says to Gabe. "He'll probably be turning soon." Gabe starts to say something in response when the faint sound of Bruce Cooper's baritone voice, now breathless and choked with agony, can be heard under the wind. The governor kneels and listens closely. "Saw the bald fuck. The kid," Bruce utters, his throat filling with blood. "They came back. They... Bruce!" The governor leans closer. His angry bark lacks any compassion. "Bruce!" The big man on the ground has nothing left. His big shaved head, now stippled with blood as black as pitch, begins to loll one last time. His eyes flutter once, and then go still, fixed, lifeless as marbles. The governor stares at the man for a moment. Then the governor looks down at the cement and closes his eyes. He doesn't see the others bowing their heads with grudging respect for the iron-fisted enforcer who dutifully did the governor's bidding, who stood by the governor without question, without recompense, without hesitation. Now Philip Blake fights the anguish seeping into his thoughts like a volatile chemical clouding his resolve. Bruce Cooper is just one man, a single cog in the Woodbury machine. But he secretly meant the world to Philip. Other than Gabe, Bruce was the closest thing to a friend Philip had in this world. Philip confided in Bruce, let him see the aquariums, let him see Penny. Bruce was unconditional in his respect, if not love, for Philip Blake. In fact, as far as Philip can tell, it was Bruce who saved his life, who forced Bob to get his shit together and treat the injuries. The governor looks up. He sees Gabe turning away, bowing his head as though offering deference and privacy to his boss in this excruciating moment, the 9mm Glock still holstered on Gabe's hip. There is only one thing left to do, one loose end to be tied up. The governor grabs the pistol from Gabe's holster, making Gabe jerk with the start. Aiming the muzzle down at Bruce's head, he squeezes off a single shot, point blank, sending a hollow point slug into Bruce's skull. The discharge makes everybody else jump, everybody except the governor. He turns to Gabe. They were just here. The governor speaks now in a low, thick voice. A voice charged with latent rage and mayhem. Find their fucking tracks. Find their fucking prison. He fixes his fiery gaze from one good eye into Gabe's eyes and roars suddenly. Find it now! Then he walks away toward the armored truck without another word. For a long time, standing amid the dead bodies scattered like broken mannequins across the desolate moonlit parking lot, Gabriel Harris is paralyzed with indecision. Watching the governor storm away, climb behind the wheel of the armored truck and rumble off into the night, leaves Gabe speechless and bewildered. How the hell is he supposed to find this fucking prison on foot, with no supplies, very little ammunition, and just a couple of men? For that matter, how the fuck are they supposed to get back home? Fucking hitchhike? Then, over the space of an instant, Gabe's state of complete and utter vexation changes to pure, unadulterated resolve when he glances back at the remains of Bruce Cooper, his friend, his comrade in arms. The sight of the big man lying in the moonlight, now as ruined and butchered as a flensed piece of meat, reaches down to some inner reserve deep within Gabe. A wave of contrary emotions wells up in him, sorrow, rage, and fear, and he bites down hard on the feelings. He orders the other two men to follow him. They ransack what's left of the merchandise rotting inside the defunct Walmart. In the shadowy nooks and crannies, under fallen displays and on the floors behind counters, they find a couple of usable backpacks, a flashlight, a pair of binoculars, a box of crackers, a jar of peanut butter, some notebook paper, pens, batteries, and 2 boxes of .45 caliber slugs. They stow the supplies into the backpacks and then set out to the east, at first following tire tracks, wending their way down a dusty adjacent access road, and then making a sharp turn to the south. They follow the tracks down dirt roads all night, until the tracks take a turn onto a stretch of blacktop and instantly vanish. Gabe refuses to give up. He decides they should fan out. He sends Gus to the east and Rudy off to the west, and they make plans to hook back up at the intersection of Highway 80 and 267. The men go their separate ways, the thin beams of their flashlights receding into the pre-dawn fog. Gabe uses his 11-inch buck knife to slice through a stretch of thick foliage, cutting a swath straight south as the sky begins to lighten with the first hints of dawn. An hour later, he runs into a few errant walkers weaving through the trees, drawn to his scent, and he manages to dodge most of them. At one point, a small one, either a child or a midget, its moldering face blackened beyond recognition, darts out of the brush at him. He takes it down with a single knife thrust to the skull. Sweat breaks out on the back of Gabe's thick neck and drips down the small of his back as he picks up his pace, carving a path through the overgrown, neglected farm fields. By midday, Gabe reaches the junction of 2 weather-beaten blacktop roads. He sees Rudy and Gus about 25 yards to the north, sitting side by side like owls on a split-rail fence, waiting for him, and judging by the sheepish, morose expressions on their faces, it's obvious that they have each come up empty. "Let me guess," Gabe says, approaching them from the south. "You didn't find shit." Gus gives him a shrug. "Passed a bunch of little farm towns, all deserted. No prison." "Same," Rudy grumbles. "Nothing but wrecked cars and empty buildings. Ran into a few walkers, was able to put them down without making much of a racket." Gabe lets out a sigh, pulls a handkerchief and wipes the moisture from the back of his neck. "Gotta keep trying, goddammit." Rudy starts to say, "Why don't we try following?" A sudden clap of gunfire echoes to the west, cutting off his words. It sounds like a small-caliber pistol. The sharp report reverberates across the sky, and Gabe jerks toward the sound, which comes from behind the tree line. The other 2 men look up. Then they look at Gabe, who stares out at the rolling hills beyond the fence. For a moment, nobody says anything. Then Gabe turns to the others and says, "Okay,
Follow me, and stay down. I got a feeling we just hit pay dirt.
Chapter 9. Lily spends most of that day holed up in her apartment, chewing aspirin, prowling around her living room in her sweatpants and Georgia Tech football jersey, taking inventory of her storehouse of firearms and weaponry. The overcast daylight filters through the blinds, making her skull throb, but she ignores the aches and pains, operating now on the adrenal charge of pure hatred coursing through her like an electric current. After a sleepless night and a series of tense exchanges with Austin, she is galvanized now, buzzing with contempt for these bastards who barged into Woodbury and made her lose her baby. After nearly 2 years of living amid the plague, Lily has developed a unified theory of proper behavior among survivors. You either help one another, if you can, or leave each other the fuck alone. But these intruders have trampled over all decent modes of interaction and ruined everything, and the outrage burns brightly in Lily. Thankfully, the tenderness in her midsection has faded slightly, along with the shock of all her dreams going up in smoke, which now only serves to make room for the white-hot loathing for these people that blazes within her as she paces the cluttered apartment. All the crates and boxes and second-hand furniture have been pushed aside, stacked along the walls to make room for the arsenal of small arms, bladed weapons, and excess ammunition spread out across the floor. It hadn't even occurred to her how much of this stuff she'd been stockpiling over the months, perhaps out of paranoia, or maybe via some kind of dark intuition. But now she sees it all laid out in orderly rows. Her two .22 caliber Ruger Mk2s lay side by side at the top of the heap, like crests on a coat of arms. An extra pair of 10-round magazines are lined up next to the pistols, and a web belt is coiled directly below the mags. Under this is a row of cartons filled with .40 caliber rounds, a machete, a row of assorted suppressors, Austin's Glock and a stock of spare magazines, a Remington .308 bolt-action MSR rifle, 3 long blade knives with varying degrees of sharpness, a long-handled pickaxe, and an odd assortment of holsters, sheaths, and pouches lined up in a neat little row. Austin's voice rings out from the adjacent kitchen. "Soup's on!" He announces this with as much vigor and cheer as he can muster, but the sadness is apparent in his voice, a constant weight now dragging him down. "What do you say we eat together in the back room?" "Not hungry," she calls to him. "Lily, come on. Don't do this to me," he says, coming into the room wringing his hands on a towel. He wears a shop-worn REM t-shirt, his long curls undone and spilling down his back. He looks nervous. "You need your nourishment." "What for?" "Lily. Please, look." "I appreciate the thought." She doesn't even look at him, just keeps studying the arsenal at her feet. "You go ahead and eat. I'm fine." He licks his lips, thinking, choosing his words carefully. "You do realize that we may never see these people again?" "Oh, we'll see them. I promise you. We'll see them again." "What does that mean?" She stares at the weapons. "It means we're not going to stop until we find them." "Why? What good is it going to do?" She looks at him. "Did the IQ level just drop in here too, like room temperature?" "Lily, have you not been paying attention to anything that's been going on? That's the problem." He throws the towel on the floor. "I've been with you every step of the way. I've been paying fucking close attention to everything." He swallows hard, takes a breath, and then tries to calm down and measure his words. "I can see you're hurting, Lily. But I'm hurting too." Lily looks back down at the firearms and says very softly, "I know that." He comes over to her and touches her shoulder. "This is insane." She doesn't move her gaze from the weapons. "It is what it is." And what is that? She looks at him. It's fucking war. War? Really? That sounds more like the governor talking. It's us or them, Austin. Austin lets out an exasperated sigh. I'm not worried about them, Lily. I'm worried about us. She scorches him with her gaze. You better pull your head out of your ass and start worrying about them, or there's not gonna be an us. There's not gonna be a Woodbury. There's not gonna be a fucking anything. Austin looks down and says nothing. Lily starts to say something else when she stops herself. She sees something in Austin's expression change, his eyes welling up, and a single tear tracking down his face. The tear drips off his chin and falls to the floor. All the fight goes out of Lily, and her guts tighten with sadness. She goes to him and puts her arms around him. He hugs her back. And then she hears Austin's voice in her ear, barely a whisper, all strangled with sorrow. I feel helpless, he utters breathlessly. Losing the baby. And now I feel like you're pulling away, and I can't lose you. I can't. I just can't. She holds him and strokes his long hair and murmurs softly in his ear. You're not gonna lose me. You're my man. Do you understand? It's you and me. End of story. You understand? Yes. His voice is barely audible. I understand. Thank you. Thank you. For a long moment they hold each other in the ashen light of that cluttered living room, saying nothing, just holding each other as though bracing themselves. She can hear Austin's heavy breaths in her ear, can feel his heart beating against her chest. I know what it's like to feel helpless, she says at last, looking into his eyes, their faces nearly touching, their breath mingling. Not long ago I was the poster girl for helplessness. I was a train wreck. But somebody helped me, gave me confidence, taught me how to survive. Austin holds her tighter, and he whispers, That's what you've done for me, Lily. She plants a soft, tender kiss on his forehead and pulls him into a tighter embrace. God help her, she loves him. She will fight for him. She will fight for their future. She will fight to the death. She cradles the back of his head, stroking his long hair. But all she can think about now is getting into the shit and exterminating each and every one of these fucking monsters who remain a threat. At dusk that night, the governor sits by himself in the empty bleachers of the speedway, the wind tossing litter across the deserted infield. The sky, heavy with toxic particulates, streaks with ribbons of gold and fuchsia as the sun dips below the clouds and dust devils swirl across the track on the bluster of the day's end, all of it reflecting Philip Blake's pensive mood. A great military leader once called this time the great inhalation before the storm, and Philip feels a similar weight in the air. Sitting in the waning light, he marshals his energy and fantasizes about the glory of battle, and the satisfaction of seeing that bitch who crippled him come apart at the seams like a blood-filled piñata. Philip's mind percolates with the dark energy of war like an atomic particle accelerator, humming with rage, turning this magic hour light into an unholy rite, a sacred invocation. Then, almost as if conjured by his thoughts, a harbinger appears, a stocky figure in camo pants, boots, and army surplus jacket, materializing in the shadows of the speedway's far portal. Philip looks up. Gabe trots across the infield, breathless from running, his portly face filled with urgency, eyes blazing with excitement. He sees Philip. He circles around the end of the stands, hopping over the iron cordons and climbing the bench seats until he approaches the governor.
They said I'd find you here,
he says, hyperventilating, leaning over and putting his hands on his knees. Take it easy, Kimosabe, the governor says. I hope you got good news for me. Gabe looks at him and nods.
We found it.
The words seem to hang in the air for a moment, the expression on Philip's face unreadable in the fading blue light. He stares. Start talking. According to Gabe, when they heard the shots that day, they crept through the thick woods adjacent to the 2-lane until they snuck up on a couple of chicks and some older dude in a clearing doing some target practice. Gabe and his men stayed out of sight, huddling behind the trees, watching from a distance, as the 3 unidentified folks took down a few biters, and then started dragging one of the bodies back toward a high fence in the distance. At first, none of it made any sense, but when Gabe and the boys finally followed a path up a hill to get a better view from higher land, and they got a good glimpse of what lay beyond the fence, spreading across the neighboring patchwork of farm fields like a vast housing block that had simply dropped out of space, all the pieces fell together. The place once known as the Meriwether County Correctional Facility stretches almost as far as the eye can see across the pasture land on the eastern edge of the county. A zigzagging network of gray brick post-war buildings situated behind 3 layers of security fencing. Gabe realized instantly that the reason nobody in Woodbury had thought of this place is probably due to the fact that it had been defunded by the state of Georgia in the crash of '87, and for years it had been off the radar, sitting out here in the rural hinterlands like a ghost ship. The only reason that Gabe's memory was jogged by the sight of the place was the fact that Gabe's cousin Eddie, a drug dealer from Jacksonville, had been held here in the late '90s pending his appeal. The state had taken to using the place as a glorified waiting room, technically a jail for convicted felons, running it on a skeleton crew, but essentially keeping it stocked and armed and locked and loaded. For the most part, the property seemed fairly secure to Gabe, but not by any stretch of the imagination invulnerable. Inside the perimeter of razor wire and guard towers, the exercise yards and run-down basketball courts lay deserted, cleared long ago of any biters. And although the outer edges of the fences swarmed here and there with stray walkers, clusters of them drawn to the scent of the human inhabitants like bees drawn to honey, the soot-stained buildings looked relatively solid, with good bones and stacks on the roof pitches pluming puffs of exhaust. Somebody must have gotten the generators and emergency apparatus up and running. The condition of the place suggested the potential for refrigeration, showers, air conditioning, cafeterias stocked with food and supplies, amenities such as gyms and weight training rooms and arcades, all of it just begging to be taken. They've got the fences, Gabe explains now, standing on a metal bench only inches away from where the governor sits, intently listening. And they seem to be letting the biters form a perimeter around those fences, maybe by accident, or maybe they're smarter than we thought. Gabe pauses to let this sink in. Go on, the governor says, not taking his eyes off the empty racetrack, thinking it over as the gathering darkness pulls a curtain down on the arena. I'm listening. The thing is, Gabe says, his voice dropping an octave, getting taut and thick with anticipation. There ain't a whole lot of them, and they can't have that many weapons. The governor doesn't say anything, just keeps gazing at the hazy shadows that are deepening at the edges of the track, his single visible eye narrowing. We watch them for hours, man, Gabe goes on. We hit them tomorrow and they go down like chumps. I'm telling you, they'd barely put up a fight. No. The word pops like a firecracker in the gloom, and it has the effect of a splash of cold water on Gabe's face. He does a double take. He looks down at the governor, and he tilts his head with consternation. The governor stares at the night for a moment, and then gazes up at Gabe. We wait. anger and dismay flare inside the stocky man. "God damn it, Governor! After what they did to Bruce, we need to take them down now." "Excuse me?" The governor's one good eye holds Gabe in its thrall for a moment, the tiny pinprick of light in the center of his iris reflecting the moon like a fuse that's been lit. "After they escaped, their guard was up probably for weeks. We couldn't find them." He pauses with the theatricality of a professor giving a lecture. "After Martinez betrayed them, and they butchered him, their guard was up again. Still nothing from us." By this point, Gabe has begun to nod slowly, almost to himself, finally getting it. "Now they've raided our territory, killed some of our men." The governor goes on with that dark, glittering gaze locked onto Gabe. "They've got to be expecting us to follow them back. We wait. We wait for them to relax again. That way, they don't expect it. They convince themselves they're safe, that we've given up or we can't find them." Gabe nods. "That's when we fucking strike," the governor says. "And if you want to be along for the ride and not a rotten piece of biter food, you'll shut your goddamn mouth and get the fuck out of my sight." Gabe stands there for a moment, swallowing back the dismay and shame. "Now!" The booming echo of the governor's voice carries over the empty stands. The next day, the dynamic in Woodbury changes. Every man, woman, and child can feel it, but few can articulate the tension that looms shark-like beneath the surface of daily life. The way children are kept mostly indoors and quiet, and occupied by coloring books or board games. Or the way conversations among the adults become muted and hushed and urgent. Any trace of the gallows humor that once peppered the bitch sessions around the coffee urn at the Main Street diner now fade away completely, replaced by a grim sort of purpose to each exchange, each task, each anxious meeting. Over the next week, Gabe and Lily huddle with the town's elders and explain what's going on. In private meetings, they prepare the heads of families and the strongest of the young adults, those who will be on the front line, for the coming assault on the prison. They delegate duties required to get the town on its war footing. And soon a kind of organic hierarchy emerges. If the governor is the high command, then Lily and Gabe become his generals, relaying orders to the rank and file, organizing the ragtag battalion of residents into a ferocious invasion force. Lily becomes the self-appointed standard-bearer, turning the fear